Hey guys, what's up? This is Michael, and today I'm going to be reacting to the new trailer for Ableton Live 12. Full disclaimer, first time seeing the trailer, going to be really excited to see what they're offering on this year's update, and can't wait to dive into it, so here we go. Okay, so just looking at the main menu right now, everything pretty much looks the same. So you can see in the top right-hand corner, they have a new sample rate section. It says 48 kilohertz. So I assume you can change the sample rate from the project rather than having to do it in the settings, which is really cool. That really only comes into play when you're recording vocals and recording live instruments, just based on your interface, just making sure the time code is exactly the same. Now let's keep going. So now it looks like you can have your audio effects, your clip view, as well as your session view all in one tab, which is really interesting because before you can only really have like one or two sections open at a time. So having all of them available will definitely speed up and hopefully make our lives a lot easier. So it looks like they're really trying to simplify the way the session view works rather than having, the name of your track as well as the sends, returns, panning, volume, and automation all kind of on the right side. It looks like you can now have it on the bottom section. So you can still, rather than it being kind of like session view main thing and then swiping at the tabs of the different parameters, you can now have it flipped. So you can now have, I believe he's showing the sends right here, mixer view. So now you can actually mix directly from here as well as the session. This is cool. This is definitely interesting. I personally never use the mixer view. A lot of times when I'm mixing, I'll just look at the channels or I'll have something condensed so I can look at all of them at the same time. But this is definitely good and solid. We'll probably take advantage of this definitely when it comes out. This is probably the biggest change. I saw some clips on TikTok about this. They have a new search function for samples. And this is very much needed because I can't tell you how many times I'd be looking on Ableton search function, looking throughout my entire library, organizing it through packs, and it's just almost impossible to find anything if you don't already know where it is. Personally, for me, I use Splice a lot, and Splice is great because they have their built-in application where you can search and filter out different things like, filtering things based on key, tempo, type of instrument, genre. It just makes it a lot easier on yourself because now you have the ability to select a couple things at once from one specific set of categories versus kind of blindly looking and typing in keywords to hopefully get close. This is great because now we have a content section. You can choose which type of thing you want. The type, which is really cool too. So loop, one shot, MIDI clip, MPE preset, multi-sample preset. The sound type, which is going to be interesting. The drums character, and then devices. This is great. I think any searchability and any kind of built-in database management for samples is awesome because then you don't need to buy something like XO or reorganize your sample packs every couple of months. You can just have it all built into the browser, and it allows you to find stuff that you already have that you might not need to download for the future. I have like millions of samples at this point, and it's almost impossible for me to go through all of them to remember everything that I have. So this is a great way to know exactly where things are, as well as the ability to find things that are kind of hidden in a pack that I might not have remembered. This is cool too. So Splice was one of the first companies, I think, as of most recently, they introduced a similar files section where you can choose a sample on Splice and you press similar and it'll find you, I think, around 5 to 10 different samples that are around kind of the same characteristics, same tags that you can use as alternatives. This is great on Ableton because there's so many samples that I'll have where it's like, I remember I had, a rim shot that sounded like that. This one's cool. I would rather have another one that can kind of sound a little bit more identical, or maybe switch it out and just kind of like hot swap it to see if I can find a better one that fits. This is a great way for that because now rather than having to dig or just type in search and like manually skim through every sample that has the word bass in it, I can find similar ones that are already kind of either based on the waveform or based on the sound structure are kind of in the same landscape is, I guess, the correct term. A lot of times when you're looking for samples, you might find something that works, but it's not in the same scope of the song. Like it won't fit in context. This is a great way to find samples that will fit in context as well as be similar to the one you were picking. So that's really cool. Cool. And then they just go through the different color optimizations for Ableton, which is great. I personally work, I think, in like light mode, and I have the grid lines all highlighted because it makes it easier for me to see. This doesn't really matter. I feel like they'll add a couple more Ableton skins, but for the most part, I really don't change this. So this is interesting. So these are MIDI effects that they're now adding. So launch used to be part of a MIDI clip section that is now integrated into this one all-inclusive MIDI setting section. So there's launch, pitch and time, which I think they'll go into, transform, which is new, and then generate. So all of these are new. I think they're just looking at transform right now. So we have arpeggiate, connect, ornaments, quantize, recombine, span, strum, which is a big game changer for anyone that's been on like Ableton for forever, and then time warp. So these don't really give off an initial idea of what they are. Arpeggiate, we can kind of assume what that is. Quantize, we can do the same thing. Strum, obviously we know what that means. It's literally just like strumming the notes, so they're all kind of hitting sequentially, so they're kind of creating a guitar-like pattern. So let's dive in and see if they'll show us more examples. So that's cool. So transform, I assume, allows you to just do various things based on the MIDI that you already have available, and allows you to add some sort of randomization to those things. So that's one of the main things that I think a lot of producers can take advantage of, is just the ability to randomize certain features, because one, it allows you to find new unique sounds and new unique chord progressions and different things that would happen that otherwise you might have not stumbled upon by yourself. So that's really cool that they're integrating more randomness. You don't need to have a lot of Maxify devices kind of hooked in like a weird, machine to make them work like that. So that's really interesting. Next, we have generate. So what they're looking at right now is, I guess there's 4 different types of generations you can now have. There's rhythm, seed, shape, and stacks. So what I think rhythm is, it's going to change the rhythmic groove of whatever samples you have chosen, kind of like how groove pools work, in a sense that you can drag in, quarter notes of a hi-hat and it'll change it to add more swing, add more characteristics, change it like that. Seed, I don't really know what that really means. Shape, same way, don't really know. That might change the length of the notes, so you can adjust and kind of randomize the length. And then stacks, I assume it's the chord voicing, so you can change it from just like a normal voicing to, augmented or diminished chords. So hopefully we'll see more of that. There's a lot of tech demos out on Ableton 12 already. People got an early access and just trying it out. Highly recommend checking those out on YouTube as well, just to get a better hands-on idea of what it actually is. So yeah, so it literally looks like it just randomizes the progression based on some parameters that you give it. So not completely random, but enough where you can get something and be able to keep it. A lot of people wanted something like this built in for a really long time, especially with arpeggiators, right? There's a section in the built-in MIDI effects for Arpeggiate, which just does random, and I think you could choose the duration of the note. People would then route this to a MIDI track and then output the MIDI, so then they can use that and keep anything that was cool and then reroute it to whatever synth they're using to have it handle that. This is a cool way because now it's all built in, rather than having them to do kind of a whole workaround. You can just do it in one clip, which is really nice. That's cool. So now there's a ability to fill based on the grid. So rather than using like the pen tool and clicking and then dragging, you can literally just highlight a region and be like, all right, I want you to split up into triplets, quarter notes, eighth notes. This is great because it saves a little bit of time. It doesn't save too much time, but you can imagine like if you're manually typing in hi-hats or you're manually doing other things like that, having the ability to just add in a custom rhythm immediately is game changing and will definitely save you minutes across your year, but definitely time overall. It looks like you have a global key and a global, let me actually zoom back to see what they did. Yeah, so it looks like you have a global key now. So you can just set your project to like C major. That'll be interesting. I'm not really sure how they're going to implement that completely, because what happens when you change the key of your song halfway through, or you're doing something different with the MIDI that doesn't actually align in the key. So we're going to see how that really goes into play. I'm not sure how effective that's going to be for a lot of people that switch keys throughout their track. You can just have one global one that makes it set for everything. So rather than having to change it, you just send one and you're good. So that's probably why they added it. Not really sure it's going to be used that often though. That's interesting. So they're adding in custom tunings. There's a whole science to this. I'm not going to try to explain it because I don't fully understand it, but A is a certain frequency to make sure that if A is that frequency, then if we double it, then that's going to be an octave up. If we, do it by half, then it's gonna be an octave down. And that's kind of how they do all the tuning based on that, because it's all math-based tuning. I don't really know how often people are gonna use this just because of, most genres are kind of stuck on, like, if we're in C major, we're gonna be in C major for the entire song. We're not gonna change key. That's kind of how most genres are. I can see this being really interesting for film scoring as well as sound effects designing. Rather than being locked into kind of traditional key, tempo, and stuff like that, you have the freedom of changing the key entirely. So it's like, hey, for the new Star Wars film, we're going to make sure that A is going to be, 560 hertz, and it's going to be completely different, changing the mood of everything. That'll be interesting to see. Tunings are something that I think a lot of, musicians are going to lean more into, just to kind of invoke a different feel of what is normal. So that'll be cool. We're really excited to see what people use with this feature. So this is one of their new, I think this is a new synth, Deep H. It looks like it's a 2-voiced or 2 sound sourced instrument that looks very basic actually. It's kind of like Contact has this like play series of instruments where it's basically 2 different voices. You can adjust the amount of A and adjust the amount of B. You can blend them together to kind of create this unique, mixture of the 2 sounds. This looks like pretty much the exact same thing. But then there's this crazy matrix that they're showing now, which is nuts. That's wild. I don't really know how that's gonna come into play. It might not be available for every instrument. It might only be available for Deep H. But that's cool. That I see can come into play for a lot of sound designers and doing some cool stuff like that. Next, we have Roar, which I believe is a multi-band compressor based on another video that I watched. Cool. If anything, it's going to be a hopeful brother to something like Overdrive and something like Amp. A lot of people love the Ableton in-house distortion plugins and compressor plugins because 1, they work really well, and 2, they don't bite up your CPU, so you can run like 10 of them on the same track, and nothing will happen, and they'll sound really cool, get some cool textures and stuff like that. This will be interesting because they don't really have something like this right now, and it's going to be cool to see how this sort of distortion comes into play. Looks like there's different modes for the shaper as well as the amounts. So it says stage 1, so it sounds like is you can route multiple stages to the same distortion plugin. So that'll be interesting to see how people use that. So it looks like it kind of has the same ones as Overdrive and the Saturator, but just more. So half-wave rectifier, full-wave, polynomial, fractal, tri-wave. So just like, distortion is great because you can get some cool things from very soft and, synth-based sounds. So this will be really fun to experiment with. And Granulator 3, so that's really cool. Granulator 2 was a big plugin, still is a big plugin for a lot of EDM producers and a lot of like hip hop producers because it's cool. Granulator is basically taking a waveform, stretching it, and allowing you to pick different sections or grains of it that you can kind of blend together to create. A lot of pads use it because it makes a lot more movement, and it relies on a lot of randomness to make some cool textures. So cool that there's Granulator 3, and it looks like it's a built-in effect this time. It's not some third party. So interesting to see how this will come into play. They definitely simplified the view, which I think is going to be really helpful for a lot of people, especially that are interested in, granular synthesis, but don't really understand a lot of it and are kind of confused by I know Granulator 2, there was like 20 or 30 parameters on this. This looks like there's like 10. So hopefully it'll be a little bit easier for us to digest. So it looks like they're probably going to start launching some more packs. That's the only real thing I can think of when they're showing this. Probably more built-in Ableton sample packs. Personally, I don't really use them a ton. I just haven't really spent the time to dive into them, as well as usually when I upgrade, I just upgrade the very basic package because I just want the DAW upgrade. I don't really need any of the extra sounds or anything because sample library is pretty built out already, so it doesn't really add a lot of value for me. So that will be interesting. I think we'll see some more sample packs by Ableton. A lot of people are really big fans of like third-party packs, especially if you specialize in a different genre of choice. For example, I do a lot of K-pop, and usually our go-to is Splice. We rarely go to anything else other than that. Might be cool. Might dive into it this weekend just to see if there's any cool sounds in there that I haven't found already. But definitely something to look forward to. Okay, for some reason it doesn't say how much it costs for me. I don't really understand. Okay, upgraded Live 12. Okay, so it's $183. You're basically getting Ableton 11 plus some MIDI effects for $183. Okay, I don't. That it seems like a lot of money for some reason. I don't know. Like for a DAW that is as big and as popular as it is, it's almost kind of like, do you need to upgrade every year? I personally don't think you do. Like I was on Ableton 10 for like 4 or 5 years, and then I finally switched to 11 because I had to. Because every time you switch and upgrade your DAW, like you kind of have to rework, and you spend like a month trying to figure out how your workflow is going to change because the program is different. You know, the key commands might not work. You have to kind of change the way you make stuff because the program has done changes, and you know they've made adjustments where it's different now. With that in mind, obviously it comes out during the holiday season because they're kind of boosting their sales for Q4, and they want to prove like, hey, we got some new shit, be excited, you got, you know, money hopefully for the holidays, like buy this, it's really cool. Am I going to order this? You know, based on what I've been seeing so far, and this is like a very much like a totally transparent, like I haven't really dived into Ableton 12 a lot because I personally just made a note like I'm probably not going to get it because I'm with Ableton 11, it's been working fine. I just had the horror and nightmare of having to upgrade all my plugins and make sure everything was working with the current system based on my operating system. It does what it needs to do for me. Like I don't think Ableton 12 is really adding anything that's going to change the game for me that's really going to be worth adding it. You know, they're adding a synth, you know, one new audio plugin, and probably a couple other things that they're not mentioning. You know, the MIDI stuff is cool. Like, great, you know, is it worth $183? I don't really know. It's one of those things where I don't want to have buyer's remorse of buying something that's like, oh, this is really cool because it's like I'm hyped because everyone's saying good things about it, and then you try it out and it's like I don't really see how this was really worth it. Like I spent this much money, I'm not taking advantage of the features that are added. Still with Ableton 11, like there's features on there that I just not have dived into because either I don't have time or I just like forgot about them because they weren't important enough, or they didn't make a lasting impression on me or save me time. That's the thing. It's like when you're making an upgrade like this, unless it's giving you access to a tool you didn't have before, 1, 2, speeding up your workflow and making sure you can make stuff faster, or 3, giving you something that you can use and you plan to use now in your current setup, then it doesn't really make sense to buy it. I can see that happening with this. Like $183 is something I would expect if they added like, you know, 3 or 4, you know, new audio effect plugins. You know, ARA, which is, from my knowledge, ARA is basically allowing you to add a plugin to a specific audio track. So think like Melodyne, right? You have a raw vocal take and you record it. Instead of having to have Melodyne on the channel, you can have it just on that audio waveform. So then you can make changes to the waveform and it embeds it into the track. So rather than having to do the rerouting, resampling, and flattening and freezing and all that jazz, you just had to do it once, and now it's embedded into that, what's it called, audio effect. People have been asking for it for a really long time because other DAWs already offer it. It seems like something that Ableton could easily add based on just how their warping functions work and how their system is already built and how the DAW already works. But I don't know. We'll see. Maybe Ableton 13 will have it. Who knows, right? For me, I'm probably going to wait. I'm going to watch some more videos and see if it's really worth it and if people are actually enjoying the program. But for me personally, for basically the work that I do, I don't think it's worth it yet. Maybe if it goes on more sale later on, but $183 for something that is more of like a free update than a paid update, I'm probably going to hold off for now. But what are you guys' thoughts on Ableton 12? Have you checked out any videos? Anything cool that I missed that you think I should check out for another video? Please write in the comments down below. Definitely want to dive into it a little bit more before I make a final judgment call. But thanks guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and happy holidays.